Good evening, everyone. I will call to order the Marin Water Board meeting of March 5, 2024. Terry, if we could have roll call, please.
Yes, good evening. Director Larry Russell,
Here.
Director Monty Schmidt,
Here.
Director Jed Smith,
Here.
Vice President Matt Sampson,
Here.
and President Ranjiv Kush.
Here. Do we have a motion to adopt today's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Terry, any public comments on the agenda?
There are none?
Then could we have a vote, please, to adopt our agenda?
Yes. Director Russell?
Aye.
Director Schmidt?
Aye.
Director Smith?
Aye.
Vice President Sampson?
Yes.
And President Kush.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next item are any public comments on items that are not on the agenda?
There is one, Mr. Phil Sauter.
Thank you. I understand that some folks look at the water spilling over the tops of our reservoirs as a crime against humanity, and that we should be building new reservoirs and enlarging existing ones so that we don't lose even a single drop. But I'd like to suggest that while spilling may be a crime against humanity, it's not necessarily a crime against nature. The limited amount of water that escapes our reservoirs in these wonderfully wet winters can be of great use to other species, plant, fish, insect, and animal. I don't remember it personally, but there was a time that we didn't have the number of dams and reservoirs we have today, and Marin was no less desirable a place for humans to live. We just got by with less water for our lawns, and other species got by with their lives. Worth remembering that Peters Dam, while it gave us humans more water for our landscapes, also caused the salmon population to collapse. And it ushered in an era of oversight from the State Water Board that, to this day, requires us to release much of that extra captured water in the form of environmental releases so that creeks can flow and fish can begin to make a comeback. One of the things we could do to increase reservoir storage is to remove some of the sediment in our reservoirs so that their existing capacity can be maintained. And if that's too heavy a lift, I also recently read about sediment bypass tunnels that can keep some sediment from entering our reservoirs in the first place, helping to preserve existing capacity. And these bypasses, I understand, can also partially restore sediment dynamics in the creeks downstream of dams. So while it may look, while some may look at reservoir spills as a failure, I'm going to look at them as a success and a symbol of how lucky we are to live in a place and time of abundance. For me, it's a real win to be able to share some of that abundance with our biodiverse community.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, then we'll move to directors and general manager announcements. Matt, we'll start with you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. And hopefully you can hear me okay. But the only announcement I have this week, President Kush, is we met last Thursday, the 29th of February, as part of our Watershed Recreation Committee. And there's a special meeting just to introduce the feasibility draft study that we both took board comment from, as well as public comment. And then that report will be forwarded on to the March 21st Watershed Committee meeting, which is our next one. And that's it for the evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Larry?
None. You might mention, Matt, that it was a very well-attended meeting. That was for sure. It was the fullest I have ever seen the council chambers in my 20 years on the board that we've used that location.
Yeah, Larry, thanks for that. It was well attended, over 300 public attended both online and then in person. And I believe we had close to 60 speakers. So it was very well attended, very well engaged public. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, good meeting. Jed?
All good. All good.
Monty? Okay, and I just have one announcement regarding our February 12th Communications and Water Efficiency Committee and Special Board meeting. We had great updates on two items. The first was the district's water efficiency programs and progress towards a water efficiency master plan. The second update was on planned outreach activities to promote water efficiency programs and services to customers. The public may access and view the video recording of the February 28th committee meeting. Sorry, I said it was February 12th. It was actually February 28th. Sorry about that. That committee meeting the video is available on our Marin Water website. And with that, we can move on to regular agenda items. starting with item 8A. Oh, sorry, Ben. I completely missed GM comments.
I don't have any this evening.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Then we'll move on to item 8A, which is our water supply update.
No, there aren't any consent items.
Can apply for secretary.
Good evening, Paul Sellier, Water Resources Director. And Lucy is pulling up the presentation and she'll be taking us through the water supply update for this evening. And I think we have some notes in there about the volume of spill that was mentioned earlier by one of our customers in the comments on items not on the agenda.
I might want to point out that, you know, the spill works in conjunction with the releases. So we have a flow measurement downstream that we have to meet. However, the water gets out of the dam,
That's
either
right.
through the valve at the bottom or over the top.
Right.
So it's not as damaging as it might seem to some. But Phil is right, what you said. Nature likes it.
Good evening, Lucy Croy. So tonight I have an update on water supply, relatively brief update, but good news going into March. So I'll give an update on water supply conditions. We'll go through a bit of a seasonal forecast for the next few months and then end with projections. Starting off looking at precipitation, it's been a wet start to 2024. We were average through the end of 2023, but going into the first few months of 2024, we've had, it seems like storm after storm. And right now we're at about just over 50 inches of rainfall for the water year, which is a little, just a couple inches below our average for the total water year. So it's great to see that we're just about the total rainfall that we'd expect for a full water year. So we're the orange line shown right up there in the middle. And this is 129% of average for this date and aligning pretty closely actually with last year when we had received a lot of rainfall and ended up, I think at 76 inches. So it was a fruitful year last year as well.
Does anybody, including us, track intensity?
Intensity?
Yeah, like inches per hour.
I don't know offhand.
Somebody might.
I would assume maybe some of the flood control would. I haven't seen it offhand.
I saw some rain events that were like the tropics.
Yeah.
I mean, as hard as I've ever seen it rain,
Yeah.
short duration, but extremely intense.
Yeah, I think you'll see a little bit later on, there's a slide on our participation as an affiliate member of the
Oh,
Center
good.
for Western Weather Extremes. And they definitely do. There's a number of things that they're up to with respect to ARs, and intensity is certainly one of those.
Is the new radar running yet?
I don't think it's complete, but you're referring to the new radar that's going up on Mount Barnaby. That'll kind of fill in one of the holes for the AQPI program that they're looking at, which is a sort of a now forecasting for almost exactly what you said, which was to understand exactly where the rainfall event is and what sort of intensity to expect.
Add that this rain has been almost perfect. It just every week it keeps the ground wet, never gets a chance to dry out, so it runs off. It's shockingly perfect from my experience.
I would just say it would be better if it rained during the week and not on the weekend, but other than that, I think I have to
Yeah,
agree.
but you got to go back to Phil's thing. That may be true from the human side, but from the nature side, you know, they don't know what day of the week it is.
Yeah. So actually building off that, the runoff that we've seen that's filled up our storage, and at the end of January, we actually started spilling. So all of our reservoirs are full, and it's hard to see on this chart, but we're at max capacity for all 7. And so one interesting thing I noted looking at this chart and thinking about some of the reservoir spill that we've had over the last 2 months since we did start spilling. Going into this water year, we were about 15,000 acre feet below So we've gained that in runoff. And then with these storms building on each other, we've actually seen 63,000 acre feet and estimated. And that's just in January and February. So between that and the 15,000 that we gained in storage, you're looking about 75,000 acre feet that we've filled up in the last few months since the water year started. And I noted before that we're at just about 50 inches of rain. So this actually, it does tie with what we expect for having average rainfall and runoff. We typically see around 50 inches, around 80,000 acre feet. So it's always an impressive number to hear 80,000 acre feet for 50 inches. But if you can have these storms one after another, this is the kind of impact we do see. So we'll see how many more storms we have over the next few months, but right now we're sitting well in our local storage. Lake Sonoma and Lake Mendocino up in Sonoma Water, they're also doing well as you would expect through the Russian River. Lake Sonoma is 110% of their water supply pool, which is 122% of average, and Lake Mendocino is 126% of their water supply storage. So their pool jumps up as they get the storms, and then they drop below as they release water for flood control purposes. Demand over the first 2 months of the winter months of January and February, we've seen production stay 25% below 2020 levels. So we're seeing conservation remain relatively high. So it's good to see conservation remaining through the winter months. And we'll see kind of as we move into the spring, summer months where that goes. And we always like to take a look at NOAA and understand what may be coming in the forecast. Given that we are sitting in a good position right now with water supply, this chart was updated in February, and there's right now equal chances for more or less precipitation. So not much benefit in referencing this. But I'll note, as Paul mentioned, that we did join the Center for Water Extreme Events. So I'll get into that in a second. But I also wanted to note that right now we are experiencing an El Nino, but they're noting that it is waning. And right now they're expecting that by April we will be moving into a neutral position, and then they're expecting that actually by August we might move into a La Nina. There's like a 79% prediction. Who's to say what that means exactly? But as I've shown with the charts, we're sitting okay with storage for now. So it's good to see. So the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes, CW3E, is a bit of a shorter way to say it, is a bit of an exciting affiliate group that we just joined. And it's a way to have another resource at our hands to do better predictions and look at tools that are available, especially to the West Coast and for water agencies like us that are impacted by atmospheric rivers. So we're excited to join recently and get involved and hopefully start bringing these tools more into these water supply updates over the coming months and years.
Where's it based?
It's actually at Scripps down at UC San Diego. Yeah, so it's mostly a research institution that then has brought in water utilities. So we'll be bringing in more of those tools in the coming updates. And then taking another look at projections quickly, as you'd expect, given what we're seeing with storage and the runoff that we're receiving right now, we're sitting in a good place. And then even under a condition in which we were to receive very little runoff through the end of this year and through next year, we still would be above 60,000 acre feet. But, we'll see if La Nina takes place or where we go from here. So right now, these are the forecasts that we've put out and we'll continue to monitor. So in summary, we continue to see wet weather patterns. It's been a.
Can you go back to that
Yeah.
for a sec?
Yeah.
So your key sensitivity in this analysis is demand,
Between the blue and the orange lines.
which is low demand or high demand.
Yes. Yes.
So that's a main factor is how well people
Yeah. It's
don't
conservation.
use a lot of water.
Yeah. So if we were to return to levels that were of higher demand, so closer to 2020, I noted that in that previous chart with the higher demand of 2020, if we were to return to those demand levels, we would see our storage
Okay.
drop.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I mean, it's worth noting with a 50% runoff, which is like an extremely dry
It is.
condition. So statistically, we're likely to be better than this. I don't know what a 50% runoff would be, a 1 in 110 year event or something.
It's closer to 1 in 10, 1 in 12 years.
So the key sensitivity is drought. And then secondarily, it would be
That's right.
demand.
That's right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
More variability in drought for sure.
Let's see. Summer. How fast the reservoirs drop.
Right.
It's shocking. When we know we're pulling 25 million gallons a day out or something like that, 40 or whatever the number is,
Mhm.
it adds up quick.
Oh, yeah.
So in summary, starting off March with the wet patterns that we've seen, storage is full and we're forecasting through the next few months that will stay relatively high and conservation remains high as well. So we're continuing to work on water supply projects in the background and we'll continue to monitor seasonal conditions and keep the board updated.
Great. Thanks, Lucy. Nice, concise update. Monty, start with you on comments.
Yeah, I mean, it's all good news. You know, it's good. It's a great place to be in March. So
Yeah, agreed. Jed? Larry?
It's great to me.
Matt?
No, thank you very much, Paul and Lucy, for the update. On the slide that you showed, the one we were talking about with the reservoir storage projections, those red triangles on there, can you remind us what those are?
Yes, the red triangles are the water shortage contingency triggers. And so if we are to drop below those are the points at which we would bring to the board recommendations to consider conservation levels or reductions in demand. So a 10%
Mandatory.
either voluntary or mandatory. So a 10%, 20%. And the lower you get, the more restrictive the proposal would be.
Great, thank you. That was it.
You know, Lucy, I don't remember you showing in the past updates the storage conditions in 76, 77, but it is crazy. And,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I don't think we can even imagine being in that situation, but it's not an impossibility as we've seen. So
we can't imagine it actually, fortunately, because 2 years ago, that's what it was looking like. But it seems unimaginable today as we have full reservoir spilling.
that's right. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember Alex Foreman, who was a previous board member who died in office. And Alex was a medical professional, but he had a thing for weather. And he monitored the weather and the rain and all this stuff, and he tracked the reservoir levels. And I can remember just clear as a bell, him talking about it, that the curve was like this down, and then it hit 10,000 acre feet, which is like that dead pool that you can't get to. And it goes flat like that. And he said that was the day that the pipeline on the bridge kicked in. Without the pipeline on the bridge, we would have gone dry, at least district wide. So, you know, because at that point we have no Russian River connection and no other way to get water across the bridge. And that was enough water to keep us rolling. And then, you know, our friends like Kaiser Permanente, they have drought contingency plans that are quite involved, involving trucking water. And they have set aside millions of dollars to bring water in the event we don't deliver. And there was a report done too by the county on the financial impacts of drought. They're much bigger than you would expect, much more widespread. Even things like disease went up, communicable disease, because people were washing their hands less. At least that was the theory they pitched. You know, a little shocking that much impact occurs because of drought. The good part, of course, is that the citizens do react to the problem. So that's good.
Great. Just one other quick, the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes, there must be some financial requirement for participating.
Yeah, we joined that in sort of partnership with Marin County Flood Control and North Marin Water District. So we're a shared affiliate membership. I think the district's cost was around $15,000.
Okay. So seems well worth it.
And Sonoma Water was already in.
Correct.
Yeah. Great. Public comments, Terry?
Yes, we have two, Mr. Larry Minikis and Phil Sauter. Go ahead, Mr. Minikis.
Yeah, it seems to never want to stop raining this season, and so there's a sense that we can kind of relax. The region is going to be healthy, but at the same time, the question will be, will the community begin to relax, and will demand climb? Will kind of creep up this year because this is the second really wet year, and things are good. So the message really has to be that we don't know what's around the next corner, and that we really shouldn't relax, that we should recognize that we're fortunate, and that we have really just 2 years here, maybe 3 if we do it right, but we still have to be careful with what we've got. Thanks, and good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Phil Sauter, please.
I think it's worth remembering that we already have enough water to cover our indoor water needs for 4 years, and that the reason we're going in search of new water supply is so that we can continue to use our high quality potable water for outdoor irrigation. We now use, I think, more than half of our residential water supply for lawns and landscapes. It's also worth noting that the majority of Marin Water's customers do not use half their water outdoors. They might keep a flower bed blooming through the spring and summer, but they don't use 400 gallons a day to keep a lawn green during the hot months of the year. I hope that during the upcoming board retreat, board members will reflect kindly on the majority of its customers who don't need and won't use additional water supplies that come from outside our watershed and require large capital investments. Once these outside water supplies are in operation, all customers, whether they need or want these outside supplies in the first place, will still have to pay these large additional fixed costs. I also hope board members will give some thought as to how we might be more successful in working with our super user customers to reduce their outdoor water use below 400 gallons a day and avoid the need to bring in expensive, lower quality water supplies that even our most frugal users will have to subsidize. I do understand why some believe that the impacts of the last round of rate increases will shut off the outdoor taps and let green lawns die back. It may well happen that price will be the deciding factor, but this will not create good relationships between the districts and its super user customers. They're not our enemies. It would be much better, in my opinion, to have in place effective programs that will let these customers transition to more attractive and less expensive landscaping alternatives, or perhaps have easier access to non-potable water for outdoor use. Someone will have to lead this transition, and I don't see why it can't be Marin Water and its conservation team. I wanted to thank Director Smith for his calling out that the sensitivity to supply is drought first and demand second. It's interesting that we can't do anything about drought, but we can do something about demand. I think right now there's no better time to be thinking about reducing water waste in a way that benefits all customers. And I definitely wish Godspeed to our directors on their retreat and hope they can really think about the people who don't use a lot of water and try to keep them in their minds as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have one more speaker, Miss Marilyn Price.
Well, yes, and thank you again for listening to me. And I just want to say, well, just listening to Phil, I just so heartily, I smile when I hear Phil's comments and just back up, I agree with everything that he's saying. Now is the time before people are sitting back now thinking everything is fine. At least some people probably are. And now is the time that we really, really dig into this conservation and forestall or put off forever importing water into our county, and that we learn how to live with what we have. I think from what I read, it's going to get worse, not better. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price. There are no further speakers.
Thank you, Terry. Okay, with that, thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Lucy and Paul. Now we'll move to agenda item 8B, capital program update. Alex, looks like you'll be leading this one.
Yes, I will. Good afternoon, directors. Let me just get my PowerPoint going.
Yeah, I can do it.
Oh, all right. Good afternoon, directors. Alex and I, engineering director here. I'll be presenting this item this evening, the capital program update. So this evening, we'll be reviewing the fiscal year's capital program expenditures along with the district's projects that have been completed and key projects that staff are working on or are currently underway. We'll also be looking into our historical CIP investments and how they are projected to increase through fiscal year 27, along with resource considerations to execute the capital program. And we'll be rounding out the presentation this evening with the discussion on the large capital projects for future bond funding consideration. So this is the fiscal year 24 CIP expenditures table that was adopted, and the various fund centers that have been condensed into one of the 6 categories reflected here. And the total adopted budget was $32.9 million. So as you can see in this table, the second column, you can see the expenditures and that are through February 28 of this year. And expenditures in most of the categories are on track to be encumbered over the remaining 4 months of this fiscal year. Now, I do want to point out here that you can see on the remaining budget, the 78% for the pipelines. And that number is tied kind of to the supply chain issues we've been having over this past year. But luckily, parts have started to come in. So staff will be executing contracts for construction over the remaining fiscal year that will get the encumbrances down to around 2% by the end of this fiscal year.
Do we ever work out a deal on that steel that we pre-purchased for the pipeline?
Yes, we did. We will be using a good bulk of that for the Sulahuli pipeline project. So we're working on.
Taking the pipe now, or?
No, not yet. Not yet. No. I also want to point out that under the projected remaining budget, you see the 38% under the treatment plant column. So that's largely tied to the San Geronimo treatment plant roof project, which is currently under design and will be advertised for construction next fiscal year. And that will really get that number down to a couple of percentage points. So overall, when you look at the entire CIP that we have been doing over this past year, even with the current status, we're around 6%. And once we get those other projects out, that'll drop that down. So that'll keep us in line with our current capital program as we move forward.
The roof really needs it.
Oh, yes.
Does this include fire flow?
Yes. It includes fire flow. So now this table here shows the larger capital projects identified in the adopted budget from the various fund centers that are either identified in the planning design phase or construction phase or have been completed. And this project set here comprises is about $28 million or about 85% of the total adopted budget. So the remaining projects not here that cover the additional 5% or $5 million are the smaller capital maintenance expenditures that just not so I wouldn't clutter up the table. I left them out for the sake of this table here. A notable thing I want to point out is that the pipelines here represent 47,000 feet of pipe that we'll be putting in the ground, which is 8.8 miles, which is almost twice what we've installed in recent years.
And that's going to bump up even more with the Marin City work.
Yeah, that includes Marin City. That's part of it, correct. So as I mentioned earlier in the slide, supply chain issues were an issue that the district's been working with. So, I mean, during the pandemic, the world experienced shortages in goods that could not have been foreseen. So this also included an impact to closures to the foundries that make parts for the water industry. As production of these goods stopped and available inventory in the market was depleted, that really put a strain on the water industry across the board everywhere. So some of the items that were depleted during the pandemic were brass fittings, copper service lateral, and gate valves. And the biggest one that we have seen in the industry is the brass fitting components. And in our case, the one that still represents an issue across the industry is this insulator coupling right here. So this insulator is important, or our copper service connections to our service meters, because it provides a metallic discontinuity between the consumer side and the copper and the distribution main on our side. And that allows protection from any stray currents from causing a corrosion issue on our pipeline and our service laterals. So this is a brass fitting that is machined, and it's thermal injected molded with some plastic that provides that discontinuity. So as you know, we progressed with the design of projects, the staff did, delivery times for this part just kept getting moved forward and forward, 2 months, 3 months, and it was just not really sustainable. So as a result, staff developed a new polyethylene service lateral standard that allowed the capital pipeline program to continue without the need of this insulator. So and polyethylene services are widely used across the U.S. and are they comply with American Water Works Association standards. So just to kind of put it in perspective, we ordered, or the district ordered, the insulators back in March of 2022. To date, we have received none. So as a result, when we pivoted to the new standard, the district ordered the angle ball valves back in July of 23, and those recently came in last month. So it's still a 7-month lead time item, but a lot better than not having any on hand. So by having these parts on hand, now the district staff will be able to advertise projects for construction and get the capital program moving for the pipelines.
I think the other thing that you didn't mention that it does is it would break the cathodic protection. So we wouldn't be protecting a next piece.
Correct. Correct.
Which would like double the demand on the anodes.
Yeah. So now I just want to talk on some key projects that staff have been working on. So starting off with some pipeline projects. So some of the larger notable ones here. The Granada Pipeline Replacement Project will replace about 10,230 feet of cast iron pipe in the town of Corte Madera. Staff will be bringing this item this Friday to the Operations Committee, and we're planning, or the staff is planning to advertise the project in March this year, with the completion of this project in spring of 2025. The second project is a Marin City project, which we're all aware of, which will replace the remaining cast iron pipe in Marin City. Given the size of this project, it's been broken out into 2 phases, the first of which will replace 9,200 feet of pipe with the first phase, and the second will replace the remaining 6,100 feet of pipe. Storage tank projects that are notable are the Pine Mountain Tunnel tank projects that have started construction this year, and we've completed with the first phase of this construction. In this picture here, you can see the current construction site this past summer. You can see they're constructing the soil nail wall up above. Sky Oaks Road is located back up here, and this will be the site of our future 2 million-gallon water storage tanks. In phase 1, we'll start again back up in August. And will be completed, actually should be January of 2025. Phase 2 design of the actual tanks is underway and is almost being finalized, and that will be starting construction in fiscal year 26.
Do we have a drone pilot now?
Yes, we do. We do have drone pilots.
I think it would be nice to fly these things like once a quarter or twice a year and show them in a 5-minute, show them in the board meeting so that we could kind of keep up with these without having to go there.
Okay. We'll definitely do that. Another project that was recently awarded was.
Let's go there.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'd love to. It was. I'm trying to picture exactly where that is, but first time I met you was doing a tour of this site, and that was very different. So I'd love
Right.
to go. I'd love to go again.
Yeah, right before Sky Oaks Road, there's a turnoff right there. Right now, the area is covered like every single square foot of Visqueen in California because it's protected for the rains until the next season we start construction.
Yeah, the other problem is it's a little dangerous. So it's hard to find a place. That's why the drone is nice because it can just fly over and look.
We
You
can
know,
jog up the hill.
Okay, you may have to get in front of that excavator there.
Yeah, so the Wolfpack Ridge tanks is another project that we currently advertised, and that will be recoding both of the 25,000 gallon water storage tanks on Wolfpack Ridge and Sausalito area. Construction for this is slated to start in October 24, with completion in February 2025. This last corrosion protection that the district staff is also working on an anode replacement project for corrosion protection of our welded steel pipe, which will help extend the life of the steel in the ground.
I think the other thing that could be useful here is to send a copy of the drone photos video to the health department. You know, as an update on where we are on County Mountain. So,
Oh,
you know, I think that's something they would find interesting. And they can actually see we're not just blowing smoke.
yeah. Followed up with, we're also, staff is also working on pump station and treatment plant projects. First is the Tocoloma Pump Station project, which is about a $5 million project that will replace a 1960s pumps, motors, and electrical system. Improvements at this pump station will also increase the capacity from 20 MGD to 28. And this project is currently in design, is slated to be completed in fiscal year 26. And our San Geronimo treatment plant roof here, which is a $1.7 million project that spans 2 fiscal years, is in design with construction anticipated this summer and completion in October of 24.
Where is Tocoloma?
Tocoloma is on Sir Francis Drake going out towards Platform Bridge. Far. Yeah.
I know where it is.
Yeah. Oh,
Take it right.
yeah. And the Phoenix Bontempi connection is another project that staff has also been working on. Staff will be coming back this Friday to provide a sequel update, which is on schedule. Phase 1 construction for this project is slated to start this August, which will include installing the pipeline through the tunnel. And the electrical consultant team has been hired and design is currently underway. So pump storage is something staff is still working on and is requiring more time than anticipated because of some of the more technical aspects of that process. But luckily for this project, you know, pump storage can be done and evaluated separately from the project as we progress forward, so it doesn't slow that down. And once district staff have actually evaluated all the technical information, staff will be coming back to the board with the findings for further discussion.
Friday or
This Friday.
This Friday?
Well, further discussions on pump storage later, but for the CEQA component, that'll be coming down this Friday.
Okay, got it.
Other capital projects are watershed and system improvements. The fire and fuels management, or BIFIP, is another project that was in the capital for $2.1 million with a $1 million budget enhancement. And this will allow staff to treat 1,500 acres of our watershed for fire and fuel management program. In addition, staff is also on the ERP replacement, currently doing some scoping, and staff will be coming back this Friday as well to give an update to the board.
What is ERP?
The replacement for the SAP, for the SAP program. And additional water supply capital projects that staff are also working on are the Sulahuli discharge pipeline, which will install about 2.5 miles from the current discharge point all the way into the main body of Nicasio Reservoir. And the regional and local storage projects are something that our water resources director have been keeping the board apprised, and staff will be coming back later this year with some alternatives for further discussion. So looking forward to our capital budget over time. So this graph shows kind of historically prior to 2024, just going to put my cursor right here, you know, the fiscal year has shown, you know, capital investments between $16 million to $26 million, with an average being around $21 million. So as you see after fiscal year 24, the CIP starts to really increase over the next 4 years, more than doubling. the district's historic CIP budget. And as a result, the district will need to evaluate staffing resources to address the increased project workload ahead.
I don't understand this curve because the number you just showed was 38 million that we'd spent. That was what was on the table, as I recall.
Oh,
33, right? That corresponds to 23, 24 on this chart.
32.9 million.
32.9.
32.9.
The question I have is, do you have a feel for what percentage of Marin construction we are?
You mean like contractors within Marin County?
Yeah. What position do we hold in terms of percentage of the total work done in Marin?
Oh, wow. That's a really great question. I don't have that number off the top of my
Yeah, I
head.
didn't expect you to, but it's something I think we should think about because I think it's something we should talk about.
Right.
That, we're kind of like feeding the economy,
Right.
at least a part of the economy.
Correct. We'll definitely look into that. So kind of as previously mentioned, with the increased capital budget, the resource considerations are in line with the strategic plan, starting with identifying the workload and resource needs. The district will need to leverage current staffing with external engineering consulting firms from the larger, more technical projects where we lack the technical expertise. District staff will also be evaluating the use of design build options on more of the complex projects that would be a good fit for this approach going forward. Staff will also be issuing requests for proposals for various engineering firms that are commonly used for district projects such as geotech and electrical to kind of help bundle all those together and avoid having to go for project-specific requests for proposals that will free up staff time to really focus on the capital program as we move forward. And a district will also be looking at reallocating positions to help improve the workflow process throughout the district and strategically hiring staff as the district moves forward with the increased capital program. So on to some of the large capital projects, which is really going to be a really good discussion here. So as part of the fiscal year 24-25 budget discussion, there was a board request to bring back the large CIP projects for further bond funding discussions. In the annual funding, the amount of $5.2 million for new debt service was also included in the approved rates beginning fiscal year 26. The current board policy limits the overall long-term debt to 4 times the operating budget. And the district's current long-term debt is $145 million with an operating budget of $104 million, leaving approximately $271 million in remaining debt funding capacity. So now we'll kind of go over the 4 projects that were previously discussed. So starting off in no particular order, the North Marin Line pipeline, which conveys raw water from Nicasio, Sulahuli, through the Tocolomo pump station, and also raw water from Kent to the San Geronimo treatment plant. From the San Geronimo treatment plant, treated water is pumped up to Smith Saddle tanks. The pipeline between Kent Lake and Smith Saddle tanks is made of 33-inch pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe that was installed in 1957, so 67-year-old pipe. And this type of pipe depends on the pre-stressing wires for structural integrity. And the interesting thing with this kind of pipe, when it fails, it's because the wires break and you lose integrity of the pipe bursts under the pressure. So important thing to note about this is that the North Marin Line is the district's only pipeline that provides raw water from Kent, Nicasio, and Sulahuli to the treatment plant and onwards to Smith Saddle tanks.
It's also a material that's no longer used.
Correct. Second is the San Geronimo treatment plant, which was constructed in the early 1960s and is the district's largest treatment plant capable of consistently producing 26 MGD of water. The location of the treatment plant, as the crow flies, is about 7 miles away from the San Andreas Fault. And since its construction, there have been several seismic code upgrades and updates, resulting in higher seismic structural requirements than those that were in place back in the 1960s. In the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, the clarifiers at the Rain Canada water treatment plant, which is shown here on the right, which are the same design as those at our treatment plant, were damaged due to sloshing water due to lack of lateral restraint. So seismic vulnerability such as this would render the treatment plant inoperable for an extended period of time during a strong earthquake event. Just to add a little, sunshine to this, the district did apply for a grant back in November for a BRIC grant through FEMA, and we have received notice that it has been moved on forward to FEMA for further grant funding consideration.
You might also indicate that the reason that we're concerned is it's the same design engineer. And there is a error in the design. So there's actually a structural mistake that led to those things that are laying down there are called launderers. They are the mechanism that the water leaves the clarifier, the cleaned water leaves. Obviously, they're no longer hooked up the way they're in that picture. So but we have the same basic root design.
Correct. The Ross Reservoir is also another large project that was discussed, and that was constructed in 1927 and is fed from the Bontempi treatment plant. This reservoir provides water storage to the Ross Valley area, consisting of approximately 44,000 customers. And the concrete reservoir is inadequately sized to serve the Ross Valley area and also has some structural issues with it. And rounding out the floor is the Smith Saddle tanks, constructed in 1960s, and they consist of two 5 million gallon water storage tanks, which are fed from the San Geronimo treatment plant. These tanks provide critical water storage from the treatment plant that is used throughout the transmission system in the service area and regularly serve at least 50% of our customers. So in this table here, this is kind of the result of staff discussion. We've met to discuss these 4 projects, and after discussion recommended that the Smith Saddle tanks and the San Geronimo clarifiers be considered for bond funding. Now, all these projects are important, but based on the discussions and all the information we had, these are the 2 that were recommended. So the Smith Saddle tanks provide 10 million gallons of storage to the districts and are the district's largest storage tanks in the system. A failure in these tanks would cause the district to lose the storage capacity for a prolonged period of time, requiring that the flows be regulated through the San Geronimo treatment plant. Now, regulating flows through a treatment plant is challenging because treatment plants like to kind of operate at a steady state condition. So anytime that you fluctuate the flows too much, it really wreaks havoc on the water quality, and it requires time for that to go to equilibrium. So it's very difficult to do that. Likewise, the potential loss of the clarifiers when the big one hits would severely limit the treatment plant's ability to directly filter through the filter beds. And it would not really be sustainable during the hot summer months when the demands are high. And that would further be compounded if the tanks were also unfortunately damaged during a seismic event. So, but as I mentioned before, the district has applied for a grant fund through FEMA, and it has been moved forward for further consideration. Ross Reservoir is still important. It is almost 100 years old. It does have structural issues, and it's inadequate in size for the system as it stands. And the North Marin line is our sole transmission line for raw water from the district's 3 largest reservoirs. And it also is the only line from our treatment plant all the way up to Smith Saddle tanks. The one thing that can be done is that the pipe failures can be mitigated by having pipe and fittings on hand in the event of a failure that can allow the district to repair the pipe with minimal downtime to the system.
Although when it fails, as San Francisco found, basically the soffit, the top of the pipe splits open, and from my understanding, it's not recoverable. It's just blown apart.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, these are all great projects. Those are great feedback and comments back. So replacing the Smith Saddle tanks and doing the seismic retrofit of the clarifiers would definitely improve the district's reliability and resiliency during seismic events. That would allow the district to continue providing water to our customers in a time of need. In addition, I'd like to also point out that the district recently did complete that $6 million generator project at the treatment plant that will allow the treatment plant to continue to process water regardless of PG&E. So these two projects do have an estimated bond funding need of approximately $46 million. And if the district were to be awarded the FEMA BRIC grant, that would definitely cut down the bond funding need to approximately $30 million, which could open up the option of bond funding Ross Reservoir. So just to kind of wrap things up here, the CIP is generally on track, which is good news for us, and we're just moving projects forward. Staff will continue to evaluate the resource considerations as we move forward with the enhanced CIP. And staff will definitely be returning back to the board sometime mid fiscal year in 25 to consider moving forward with bond funding on select large capital projects. And staff will be providing the board with quarterly updates on the CIP as the district goes forward with the CIP program. So at this point, we'll take any questions.
Thanks, Alex. Great summary. Jed, start with you.
It's hard for me to tell whether you're recommending something different than we already approved. So I think we had specific timeline for spending money for those 4 main capital projects that we approved. So Ben, can we talk, are there any changes? We're just identifying which are first, second, third, and fourth. I think they were all contemplated. I think they were all in our projections. And I can't tell, are we saying the last 2? I just don't know what's different.
Right. As part of the rate setting process and budget development that we went through last year, we've recognized these 4 projects. And the way I kind of look at it, it's an ongoing discussion. The board did elect to next fiscal year have that $5+ million for debt service. So that's part of the revenue plan. Based on the rates at the time, we'll look. The census rates are going down, but generally, if rates stay where they do, interest rates, it's about a 10-to-1 ballpark. So 5 million gets about 50 million. So that could change. So what I suppose is new tonight is the priority, recognizing this is an ongoing discussion. We aren't asking for a decision by the board tonight. We'll come back.
So what's different?
Well, the priorities we wanted to share with the board and review, and
But not the timeline.
we just want to give the board, there's no changes. Just remind the board of the timeline for these. There was a question or two, so I just thought it'd be a good time to remind the board where these projects are and the timing to select 2, or if we get grant funding, 3 of them.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jed. Larry?
It seems to me that we should be talking to our bond folks about timing. At the current interest rates, the numbers could be double the service, the payment. With all due respect, these projects have been in the same shape for 40 years. 41 years, 42 years probably doesn't really make a difference. So, and I don't know, have you looked at things like slip lining that North Marin pipeline?
We haven't looked into that just yet, but that'll be something we could definitely look into.
That's something that seems might be feasible there. It is unfortunate we have the wire wrapped pipe. I left Montgomery in '83, and they had stopped using that in like the 70s and went to steel cylinder pipe, which is a different kind of pipe. It's similar, it looks the same. It has a steel insert that makes the pressure part, same pipe we were taking across the bridge. And then the concrete's on the outside lined and coated, but the structural part is a solid circle of steel welded and a completely different cat than this wire wound pipe. I think that's what East Bay Mud had for their digesters, right? The ones that are on the side of the freeway there that broke. They corroded and the wires let go, and then now they have the external hoops on their digesters. And the other thing to keep in mind is that our friends at Santa Clara Valley Water figured out the problem with those launderers And so the design that it's sitting there, how to fix it. It's been determined and I think Rinconada was fixed. It must be 10 years ago, maybe more. You know, I don't quite remember when they did it. Maybe it was 10 years after Loma Prieta. It took a while. They didn't figure out the fix for a bit because fortunately Rinconada is big enough they can run without pieces of the pie.
Definitely look into that as well. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Larry. Matt?
Yep, thanks, Rajiv. And Alex, thank you very much for the presentation. These CIP budget or CIP project updates, I think, are very critical for us, especially on the frequency of quarterly would be great. And then just a reminder, if there's anything that's going to be off track or we see ourselves not being able to move forward, any issues pop up, please let us know sooner than later, because these are such important projects. On the Tokoloma pump station, can you explain or provide a little bit of insight on why we're boosting the pump capacity by 8, I think it's million gallons a day? Is that what it is? The 20 to 28 factor?
Yeah, that's a great question, Director Sampson. So currently, the 20 million gallon flow rate that we get from the Tokoloma pump station doesn't really match the current production rate that we can get out of the San Geronimo treatment plant. So this will allow us to match the production at the treatment plant from our sources from Nicasio and Sulahuli.
Great, no, that's very helpful. And then I'm assuming there's some tie into the potential water supply projects when we look to. Great. That's fantastic.
I think if I may, Matt, just in addition,
Yep.
pump station is literally 6 decades old technology where we have to go on eBay to find parts to replace this thing. So it's a single point of failure in our system for the water coming from the north. And that 8 million, that's helpful, but really this is a critical piece of infrastructure that we need to update.
Thank you, Director Smith.
Great, yeah. And thanks, Jed. I appreciate that. And I think it sounds like 2 birds with 1 stone with this one. So that's always a big win for us as well. On the large CIP projects, the 4 with a priority, it'd be interesting to take a look at the funding for those 4 and potentially tie in some of the fire flow, especially when looking at the Ross Valley Reservoir, that being a reserve supply of water for that whole valley should there be a significant fire. It'd be interesting to see, or at least test the waters of the fire chiefs in the county and see if they'd be interested in contributing to that instead of a pipeline replacement as we look to get a little bit creative and hopefully get 3 of those projects funded. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we going to lose the Quonset huts?
The Quonset hut? Oh, yes. Well, at Tokoloma, that's part of the design review that is currently underway. Yeah, that's not normal.
No, that's to say the least. Like one-off.
Yeah.
Monty?
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. This is really informative. Just a couple thoughts. In terms of the prioritization, I wonder if we've given some thought to which of these projects are most attractive for grant funding, and whether that might shift. Grants are not certain until you get them, but if there are ones that are that might be more competitive by their nature, that might be a consideration in terms of prioritization. So just, I don't know if you've done that or if that's something that could be given some thought to. I think that would help to figure out maybe how we should invest. Okay. Then the other thing is you mentioned earlier about hiring to be able to take strategic prioritizing of hiring or something to that effect. And I wonder if, I know that we've, through the dry years when our budgets were low and we were not hiring back staff that we were losing, and we had a deficit of staff. And I know that we, as a board, we've talked about trying to bring back staffing capacity to our standard full level so that we reduce the burden on staff who are still around, all people in the room included. So can you explain to me how that staffing hiring you were talking about in your presentation fits with just backfilling the positions that we currently have? And maybe that's a question for Ben.
Yeah, I'll jump
in front of you.
Yeah.
Well, what we're talking about in the CIP is a bit distinct from backfilling the positions we weren't able to fill. So we're moving forward to get our full staffing complement and making great headway. Of course, at times people keep leaving, so it's ongoing effort. This is a bit distinct from that. This is looking at with the significantly expanded capital program, how does staff deliver the commitment that we've made to you, the board, and the public? And that's where we're looking at leveraging with consultants, looking at creative approaches like design build, and potentially targeted hiring, first reallocating staff. For example, we've always had a full-time surveyor. So we're looking at getting that work done differently and potentially reallocating that position to an engineer or an inspector position to move these capital projects forward. So we'll be coming back to the board as part of these CIP updates and sharing where we are in terms of resources for the capital program specifically. So that's really what we were talking about.
So embedded in that is that there's over time, as we make shifts in technology and other such things, that we're looking at where we could maybe staff that have left one department might take that same FTE and dedicate it to a different division.
Yeah, what we are always looking at that. For example, today we're talking about bringing on an AMI program manager to start moving that effort forward. That position is reallocated. It happens to come from customer service that we were able to reduce by closing the office on Fridays.
Mhm.
So we're always looking at how we can be more efficient and potentially reallocate a vacant position somewhere for a higher need.
Okay. Functionally, are we keeping though at the same staffing levels?
Yeah, in fact, we
Not
moved
including
up a bit.
consultants. Yeah. Okay.
The board brought on this past year 3 additional positions, 2 for our valve exercising crew and 1 for the district-wide training program.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Great presentation. Great. It's helpful to understand how you're setting priorities. I think, Ben, your explanation of how much debt service we've allocated, what that allows us to potentially take on in terms of debt is also helpful clarification. I don't think it's for now, but obviously when we borrow for these big capital programs, it affects our ability to bond fund other water supply development projects. I don't know at what point we might have to consider the trade-offs between those two, given the limits of our ability to support debt and the impacts on rates that all of that debt is going to have. So that's probably going to be a tricky conversation, but look forward to that. Any public comments, Terry?
Yes, there are 2 so far. 1402 and then Larry Minikis. Go ahead, 1402.
James Holmes, Larkspur. Excuse me, I compliment the ingenuity of the staff in devising a remedy for the delayed brass fittings. However, knowing how plastic tends to break down and how we're finding out more and more about the ubiquity of plastics, micro and otherwise, everywhere in every substance, I really hope that the plastic substitution in this case does not result in more plastics in our water one way or another. And I hope that the staff will be carefully monitoring both the literature and the actual performance of these fittings to make sure we don't have a big plastic problem down the line. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Larry Minikis, please.
Yeah, good evening all again. We've advocated for increased funding to better meet our CIP needs. And while it's encouraging to see the budget climb through 2026, the reality is we're still coming up rather short on what our true needs are. And we are the oldest district. And as the oldest district, we have far increased pressure on CIP needs that are going to continue to grow over time. And one of the ways that we're going to have to address this is when we go into our next round of adjustments, of rate adjustments, and deal with the fact that we have to place more emphasis on this growing need. Just the large capital projects alone, if you add them up, they're around $80 million, a little over $80 million. And that's just 4 projects, and we have so much more to do here. So I hope the board will keep in the back of its mind that we do have to address this to the community so that they understand we have a lot of needs. We've got to find water supply. We're dealing with recreation, and we have massive CIP needs at the same time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, then we'll move on to agenda item 8C, 2023 annual work plan progress.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. Yes.
Okay, this item is mine tonight. As Terry's pulling it up. Last year at the annual board retreat, we developed a set of strategic initiatives. We brought quarterly updates to the board, and tonight is a year-end review of those efforts. A couple concepts perhaps to think about as we review these, as well as think about the retreat when we're going to be reviewing the upcoming year's annual strategic work plan. And at the retreat, you'll see it's far broader and deeper, the initiatives, the discussion we'll have next week. So these are not, as you know, the body of work of the organization the last year. And it's just, I think, important as we look at these and for the public to understand, and as we in the retreat, if we think about operations, right? Work orders, fixing broken pipes, valves, pumps, day-to-day work. 50% of our staff, that work is, I guess I think about it, baseline work of the district. So it doesn't show up in strategic initiatives tonight or next week. Same with finance, accounts payable, accounts receivable, recruiting, and HR. So we all understand this is not a review of all the work of the organization this past year. The other thing I think, as I think about these, I'd like to think of these as stretch goals. And what I mean by that, it'd be pretty easy for staff to develop initiatives where there's a high degree of confidence that they'll get done on the time frame, and all of them in the way that we present. I feel like that wouldn't stretch the organization. So I encourage us, as we put these together and we review them tonight, but thinking about next week as well, to think about that in that context, that we do want to stretch ourselves and be bolder than we think we can actually accomplish. That said, I want to hold us accountable as well, right? So there's 2 sides of this. So with that, we'll get on.
Well, it starts with putting a stake in the ground,
right?
Taking,
Absolutely.
giving yourself an opportunity to hit it,
Yeah.
and then measuring yourself.
Absolutely.
And you won't hit all of them. So
Absolutely.
thank you for, being thoughtful about it.
Okay, okay, we'll go through the different areas. So comms, we made some nice improvements to the website, did quite an effort on the agenda management system. And that's something like, it's just not taken for granted, but it's nice to have. But boy, a very big improvement and a key touch point with our customers, and historically quite a bit of frustration, and it's really working well. A lot of outreach support for key initiatives, and the storing telling collateral will be this coming December. Engineering. So this first one we've sat and really thought about, and it's moved now in 2 ways. One, we'll update the CIP this coming November, as we do every 2 years. the bigger effort, the 30-year CIP, we've realized we need to kick back, and you'll see at the retreat, a very big set of condition assessments through the organization, looking at fire hardening, looking at condition, looking at single point of failure. And all of those assessments are intended to roll up into this long-term capital plan for all of us to get a picture of what does that long-term trajectory look like, and do we have the right set of priorities? So I think it's a big effort, as you'll see next week, but important.
But on this one, does it include the district buildings?
Yes, it includes that. There's like probably 8 different specific condition assessments, and that's one of them.
So are you proposing to do the 10-year in November? Is that?
Yeah, so in November, that's more our kind of ongoing 5 or 10-year CIP that we'll be updating based on current conditions through the next, right? So rates are 4 years. We adopt a 2-year budget. So at that point, we'll be updating the CIP to make sure those 2 years are the right set of projects based on the last 2 years of, things happen. IT strategic plan, and talking to Brett and Brad, they have a document, but with the turnover in IT, they're want to move it out and have folks kind of finish recruiting and filling their section and have everyone have buy-in into the plan before they final it. And of course, the big ERP, it's enterprise. What's E? R,
Resource, right?
wait, enterprise.
Resource.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's what it is. Anyway, for this Friday, you're going to get an update on where we are on the SAP replacement. We're in the middle of this needs assessment with a recommendation on what system to go with. And then once we complete that, we move into phase 2 and really start rocking on this. And I'm a little skeptical, but what we're keeping the July 1, 2026 date as our go live target.
ERP stands for Enterprise Resource Planning.
Oh, got it.
Pretty hard to do a conversion before you have a plan.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
Maybe
Oh,
maybe
the
plan that-
strategic plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really more kind of the nuts and bolts of the IT system. So things like migrating to Microsoft 360, that's really distinct from the SAP. Moving more to the cloud. Yeah. The help desk service contract, we've reported out to the board, and you recall at the end, we concluded to keep that work in-house. And that's what we're doing now. In the district paving program, we do now have a contract with a consultant. There was a delay. We talked to the board about finding a consultant that's not tied to cities and reluctant to do the work with us. So it'll be exciting what comes out of that.
So that's good. Now we're looking at all the way to November. Because we have just got the consultant on board, and
Yeah.
we'll have a report from them. What will we have in November?
Yeah, so I think we're striving to have our initial MOUs and be able to kick off the pilot. So between here and November, we'll get the assessment from the consultant in terms of the work we do, in terms of the standards the county and the cities use, and help us develop a strategy to engage them. And the goal is to have at least 2 of the entities participate in a pilot of some fashion.
Two city governments, or
It could be I'd like the county and a city.
okay,
Because the county has the master specs.
yeah, and without their buy-in to the
Right.
pilot, then you've
Right.
just done something that
Right.
they could say wasn't appropriate or
Right.
inaccurate or blah blah blah. Okay,
Right. Okay, Terry. In HR, recruitment's a lot's going on, but including a transition to a new platform that's helping us get more applicants. I just heard I mean, it's just one data point, but we had 150 or approximately applicants for a lab tech position. But, right, apparently there's quite a bit of biotech folks, right? That slows down, and right, it's just kind of how things work for us. Diversity, DEI, you're aware that we have, we're kind of wrapping up a district-wide DEI training program, and then we'll have some DEI follow-up initiatives at the end of the year that will continue on in some fashion. The online performance management tool has complete conversion, and we're currently doing the mid-managers 360s. That's a big effort here and a big milestone for us.
On this tool, it'd be really great if, and maybe it's at a finance and administration meeting. It'd be great to see what what the tool looks like, and what are some of the metrics that come from it and things like that. That would be obviously, personal reviews are private and confidential and all that kind of stuff, but it'd be great to see what the approach looks like and what kind of metrics it gives that helps understand, things at a high level.
Sounds good. Employee engagement, we have the training program is currently in recruitment. And then we have to develop the training program, quite a bit of activities there. We have launched the employee survey, as you're aware, and we'll get that and follow up with next steps. And we're developing a broad-based communications protocol district-wide. And the collective bargaining agreement, as you're aware, was completed in November.
Can you say what the communications protocol is? Develop standards for internal communications?
Yeah, that's an initiative that we're doing to get clarity and a commitment of how everyone in the organization will be communicated to in certain baseline ways. So is by division. So I could pick finance that there'll be a document from Brett that everyone will have a weekly meeting with their supervisor. Everyone will have bi-weekly meetings with their team. They'll have meetings with their manager at this frequency and division director at a lesser frequency. And all of this is going to be shared with the organization to hold us accountable for how we do it. And I think we do good in many areas now, but there are areas that, what we don't meet. What I look at as kind of minimum standards for engaging folks with their team or with their supervisor, or seeing their manager and their director. And of course, a lot of the challenge areas are 24/7 operations or field crews, but we're going to get there.
This is, I applaud this. I mean, I think communications between staff on a regular basis, sometimes that can fall to the wayside when people get really busy, but that can really undermine communication, connection, and coordination. Is there not to micromanage by any means, but is there what communication happens in those touch points? Is it connecting on goals and objectives, annual goals and objectives, so that there's sort of what occurs in those touch
it's
points?
a good question.
It's not like, hey, Ben, how's it going? You're like, I'm good. You're good. I'm good. I'm good. We're all good.
Well,
Okay.
I would say if you don't have that, that's not an insignificant conversation.
Sure.
And for me, that's the first step. Having the opportunity, having the engagement. And it's interesting because that's the feedback I sort of get that, okay, we had the meeting, it was 5 minutes. The way I look at it, well, by the 10th meeting, those dynamics are going to change because they're more comfortable maybe get some personal connections going. So yeah, this first step, Director Schmidt, is insurance that we have a process that folks are meeting those minimums.
Well, one idea one of my companies did, I think, super well. And every meeting, they had like a meeting protocol. You had a leader of the meeting.
Right.
You had an agenda. You had outcomes. You made sure you have input. And then you made sure you had next steps. I think there's one or two others. Every meeting had to have that. I don't know if that's what you want, but that might be something you consider so that they're not a waste of people's time, but people come in, they're productive, and you move on.
I think I'm curious what the agenda is. That's well, but as a employee communication touch point that's meant to be about connections between supervisors and supervisees, things like that. I'm just curious what the conversation is. I mean, is it just like, how you doing, or, and is it without structure, or is there actually like some guidance? Because people may not know what that looks like to make it a productive conversation. Because I think this is extremely valuable, and not everybody knows what to say in these meetings, and maybe there's some guidance that could be provided.
So we do have supervisory and management training that has a lot of that kind of sort of information. But I could talk to Vicky. How close is that nexus now that we're doing this communication protocol in that training that we give supervisors or managers? Does it speak to that?
I'd be great. I'd be curious to know about that. If we can make sure that comes back up at a fact meeting or something like that, that'd be good.
Okay.
They did.
The watershed, the BIFUP is really going well. We're meeting our the budgeted work, and with grants have been able to accelerate that work. Lagunitas Creek, is you're aware, the designs are going well, and again, with granting, we've really been able to move the design and construction forward. Azalea Hills, another good story, not just moving forward consistent with the plan. It's also, we touched on this a bit at the rec plan, that it's a very interesting model as we think about new trails and abandoning old trails. It's kind of the basis of Azalea Hills and how that was done. We added trails, but we got rid of others, kind of a net environmental benefit, or at least neutral. And the rec management plan, you're pretty up to speed on that, and we'll see it again.
I guess I want to just go back to if we can go back to the recreation management. At this point, we don't have a recreation management plan.
Right.
And I think that is that's a and I understand, and for how that evolved through time to be a feasibility study of sorts. But I guess I would say we still need a plan, and I think that shift from a plan to a feasibility study still leaves a vacancy of actually having a plan that helps us manage recreation. And I gather that's
when we update roads and trails, right? We talked about adding recreation to that.
Okay. I just think that's an important shift. And so I think at this point we sort of did, I think of it as a first phase and not a completion of this. So I know it's an important milestone that we accomplished all the same, but it's a task that we haven't quite completed.
Okay. And water resources, we're moving forward with the roadmap, as you're well aware, and have the schedule for the projects, and moving with near term and long term. The conservation program, the May is the hard date to complete the conservation master plan, water loss review. You got the update, and soon we'll be complete with that. And we're well underway with implementation of the conservation element from the roadmap.
Is this your new company car? you have any idea what year that is?
That's as close to Model T look, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah. 2025. Yeah.
Okay, and I think finance wraps it up. A big budget rate setting process. The connection fees you'll be seeing this year, that process get underway. And we'll be updating select financial policies with procurement coming up next, purchasing policy, which is very ripe. So in summary, this past year was dominated by the COSA rate setting budget process along with the MOU and roadmap. That's even though within that number of advancements on enhancing touch points with customers, as we talked about, continued success on leveraging grants. We're really, really doing well. We have new leadership in the operations division and a lot of work getting that going, but it's going very well. 3 new superintendents and then a number of cascading promotions. You heard about our work to ramp up capital delivery tonight. 360 initiatives, quite a lot of work this past year in HR as well as watershed. That concludes. Any questions?
Go ahead, Larry.
I'd just like to say that that was one of the best summaries that I've seen of our progress in a past year. It's very effective. I think most importantly to be thinking about it, perhaps more than reporting on it, but it's good to see reflection.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And right, we all have a similar goal, right? To set up a process that is sustainable over the long term, right? 5-year strategic plan, annual work plans, quarterly check-ins, year-end review. And right, we keep holding ourselves accountable and moving the organization forward.
Monty?
I agree with Larry, and it's really been helpful to have these updates. Progress is really one of the on so many moving parts that we have spent time on and have made commitments on, and what we feel, I think, as elected members of the public to report to our constituents on, and we need you to guide us in that in terms of reporting on this stuff. So thank you for making that happen. And I know it's not easy to have dates slip, and I appreciate that you guys push, and I'd rather have pushing than just hitting easy dates that are playing it safe. So thank you for the update, and it's exciting. It's a lot of really, really amazing work that we've done in a very short time.
Thanks, Monty. Jed?
Have you done a goal setting like this before?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think it was super well done. When you presented it last year, I was impressed and appreciative that you put dates behind items and language that you knew was not going to be 100% correct, but at least it gave us an opportunity to follow, check in, and understand where we're going, and then report on it and keep ourselves accountable. So thank you for doing it. Appreciate the process. Anything you change to do it better next time?
Yeah, I don't think so. I did mention in my early opening comments that what you're going to see next week is big compared to this.
Right.
But I think we're up for it. And I think we want to move the organization forward in this way. And, I just, as I was writing this and thinking about it, it's particularly notable, an organization that turns over the board 3 of 5 new board members and be able to get all this work done. I mean, it only happens with a board that's supportive and working with staff. So thank you all for that.
Yep. Thanks.
Thanks, Jed. Matt?
Great. Thanks, Rajiv. Ben, thank you for the presentation, for taking the time to elaborate more on all those topics. And for me, what's helpful is I decided to take a look at where we were at this time last year and see how different we are, or today, 1 year later. And for me, there's been quite a bit of progress. And so I'm very appreciative of staff and their efforts to do that. And I'm really looking forward to next Thursday when we can start concentrating on the next piece of this puzzle. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I can only echo, Ben, all the, the kudos for getting us through a really busy and productive year. I think, your energy is definitely clear in how much we've accomplished. But, I know this is a public meeting. There's I don't want to, expose things, but I am curious, just out of transparency, Ben, if you could, is there anything that you would, that, when you think of the things that didn't happen, that or priorities that weren't accomplished, is there anything that stands out for you that you wish could have been more productive?
It's an interesting question. Nothing jumps out. I am really believe this past year was rather remarkable, where we have a water supply roadmap that's clear, that's actionable, that the board, this new board, was able to understand and adopt. We have a level of kind of fiscal stability we may not have had in quite some time. And we have this ramped up capital program to address some real needs we have. So, no, I look at it as really a, rewarding year. Now, the weather has cooperated. I mean, right? We saw in 21, it's all hands focused exclusively almost on the drought. I mean, because it's core business. So, with this weather and, the support we have, I'm really looking forward to this coming year.
Thank you. And good reminder that we live and die by the rain. So, Terry, any public comments?
Yes, we have a couple. Mr. Larry Minikis and Phil Sauter. Go ahead, Mr. Minikis.
Yeah, good evening again. And Larry, I really liked your joke about Ben's 1925 Model T going down the road there. Fortunately, there's a lot here, but I can focus on exactly the very last bullet point, which is work on watershed, including recreation plan process, Azalea Hill, and fuels reduction. And the concern is with limited resources, we have to be careful of how many resources are going toward recreational planning. Are they taking away from fuels reduction? Because if we don't reduce fuels, we're not going to have any recreation if it burns. So I think it's just an important point to note that as we go through this process, that we're balancing it in a way that we're not taking away from other very critical needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Phil Sauter, please.
Thanks very much for that summary, Ben. That was great. I know that a lot of this is internal to the district and its employees, but one thing I've noticed this year that's been a really welcome change for not so much a change, but an evolution is the communication between the district and customers. I think that's a really important thing that the district has done, that outreach and the ability to connect with customers. And I want to thank the communications team and all of you for doing that. And I think that the other change I've seen over this past year is I remember a year ago, there was a lot of pessimism about conservation. We don't think it's reliable. We don't think we can count on it. But as we pointed out, it's one of the big sensitivity factors that we do have some control over. And I've seen an evolution there too, in terms of the emphasis placed on conservation. And I just want to point those out and thank you and your team for doing that, and the board. Thanks.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Last agenda item then is just a quick review of our future board and committee meetings.
Yes, good evening. Just a couple of highlights. On Friday, March 8th is the Operations Committee meeting. One of the key items is the Phoenix Bontempi project update that was mentioned earlier tonight. And then, of course, next Thursday, March 14th at 10 a.m. is the board retreat please be at your seats at 9:59 a.m. so that we can start promptly. There are a lot of items for that day. And then also next week, March 15th, is the Lagunitas Creek Technical Advisory Committee at 9 a.m. And it will be here. And that's all for right now.
Thank you, Terry. And with that, we are adjourned.